Yeah, no, we have a big one. Ted's there. So they're reflecting. An update. Yeah, Gary. Yesterday. Meeting tonight. Just missing that. There's Matt. Lou there. Hey, man. Lou's going on. How are you? Good. Hey, everybody in person? Absolutely. Yeah. Pretty much. I think we had the last about a year. Yeah. May or June. Yeah. The last executive. That's right. May or June. So well, at least we have gas to get down here. Yeah, that's right. That's true. I remember that movie. Yeah. Same thing happened. I do remember that where they would line up. Started driving in 1976. I could remember those gas lines. Yeah. And I remember when they reduced the interstate down to 55 to try to save gas. So, well, welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. Today is May 12th. It's our executive committee meeting. Happy to see everybody. We'll call this meeting to order. Item number 2 is a vote on the approval of the agenda. No. Second. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 3 is vote on the approval of the meeting minutes from the April 7th meeting. Any discussion? Second. All right. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 4 is consent and vote on contract and expenses. Todd, you just want to run through that real quick?
Yeah, just real quick. Just have a bill for a little over $6,300 from Denton Davis Brown for legal services related to the build grant agreements that we're working on with various parties. Recommend approval. Be happy to answer any questions.
Move. Looks like a bargain. Bargain compared to. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 5 is report vote on the FY 2021 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget Amendment. Dylan.
Thank you. We're asking for an amendment to the end of this current fiscal year. As we approach the end of the year, there's a few items that we are expended all. We're kind of used up, and we still need some for the next couple of months. So if you go to the next slide, we're asking for a couple adjustments to be made here among our various work programs or work elements. You can see over there on the right side what we're proposing to move out and in of the various work categories. Basically, we need to put some additional time into 3, 4, and 5, those work elements, and taking them from 1 and 6. This doesn't change our overall budget. It stays the same. It's just shifting around, which is allowed by DOT. It's just if it's over a certain amount, we need to have an official amendment. So that's what we're asking for. This will get us through the rest of the year. If there's any questions, happy to take them. Otherwise, we'd ask for you to approve this.
The concerns, but procedurally, does this go through the finance committee before it gets here?
We did we cover them from structure?
No, I failed to mention, we did meet yesterday and I meant to mention this and failed to do so, but
Yeah,
typically we would, and it's never been an issue.
we did meet. I was my first finance meeting yesterday. We was on.
So, but typically, Dylan, you would run this to the finance committee before it came here.
If they have a meeting, I mean, I don't know if we would have a separate meeting just for doing something like this, but if they were already meeting, yeah, we would do that.
We could run this by them before policy, so we'd have a check before policy. We'll, share it with them, make sure they don't have any concerns, pending your approval today, and then before policy, they can review it.
I think, Todd, procedurally, it probably is better to have this run through finance before it gets to the executive committee.
Right. I think we discussed.
I thought we talked about that beforehand. I thought we talked about this class.
But anyway, I'm happy to move it, but I just think governance-wise, it makes more sense to run budget amendments, 100 grand, through the finance committee first. But anyway, I'll move it.
But we move it with, before it goes to the policy, is it gonna go through the finance? Is that what I heard you say, Todd, or no?
Yeah, we'll share it with the finance committee and see if they have any concerns or comments, and share that at the policy meeting.
Yeah, I guess I don't want, if they do, I don't want the executive committee saying we're fine with it and finance saying they're not. So, I mean, Bob's here as the chair. So anyway, I mean, I'd be fine if this just went directly to policy now, since you're here, Bob.
Okay.
But in the future, make sure we go through.
Yep.
You guys are fine with that.
I'm fine with it.
That's how I moved it.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 6 is report and vote on the FY 2022 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget. Dylan?
Thank you. So we have before you today the final work program and budget. This was brought to you in March as a draft, and then it was sent on to US DOT and Iowa DOT for their review. Just to recap a little bit here, for the work program side of things, this outlines what we're going to be doing over the next fiscal year, which starts in July. We have 8 work elements, and those were seen on that previous slide as well when we talked about the budget amendment. But these are the internal, how we separate our time and activities that then we ask for reimbursement for from the DOT. Underneath each one of these work elements are a series of projects and tasks that we're going to be doing throughout the year. All of these help achieve, as it says there in that red box, the goals of our long-range transportation plan, the planning factors from the Transportation Reauthorization Bill, and also just any other federal requirements placed upon MPOs. Some notable projects for this next coming year are up there on the screen. I won't read through all of those, but if you have any questions about them, please let me know. We have taken this through our various committees and so forth, the tech committee and other roundtables and subcommittees. So this is kind of how we created this list, got their feedback of what they would want to see and so forth. If you go to the next slide, like I said, we did submit the document in March for review. We did incorporate any changes and recommendations made by Iowa DOT, Federal Highway, and Federal Transit. Those were pretty minor adjustments. There was a couple places where they wanted just a little language tweaks to make sure we were really satisfying the federal requirements, primarily about how the work program is adopted, making sure that it's noted that the MPO adopts it, but Federal Highway approves it, essentially. We did update the SERPA contract amount, and this was a reduction. So we had $100,000 in the draft document as far as revenue coming into the MPO. We reduced that to 87,000, I think 600, and that's due because that's the limit that SERPA has available for payment to the MPO. So we reduced that, and then we made adjustments accordingly to make sure we still balance out at the end of the year. And then also per comments from the feds, we added a little additional explanation for why some things might have been carried over from last year to this year to next year, primarily because of things like COVID. We weren't able to get committees together and so forth. So just little things like that. We added some additional explanation for them. We did have one additional project requested. That was from the city of Des Moines, so that was put in there. But otherwise, things remain largely the same as last time. On this slide, you see the revenue anticipated for the MPO. I think we've shown you this in the past. One comment we received from the Budget Finance Subcommittee when they met previously was to include the build grants as well as the local match for the build grants in that total amount. That way, when we do our audit at the end of the year, the audit will look at these things too, so that our audit and our budget better match each other. So there wasn't any change to this aside from that SERPA reduction, like I mentioned. Then if you go to the next slide, this shows our expenditures. No big changes here aside from tweaking things a little bit here and there, primarily in the indirect costs, I'm sorry, to make sure that we have a positive balance at the end of the year. Even though it's a minor positive balance, we're breaking even essentially to make up for that SERPA change. I'm not sure if there was another slide. No, I think that's it. So that's what we have for you today. The Budget Finance Subcommittee did meet yesterday and did look at this and didn't have any issues with it. So with that, we'd ask for your approval.
Excellent. Any questions for Dylan? I move it.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 7 is report and vote on the FY 2021-2024 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment. Shiroshi is going to give us an update, I believe.
Yes, thank you. This item is a TIP amendment request by DART to adjust funding for their transit formula projects. So DART will earlier estimate funding for their formula projects, and later they will need to come back. They generally come back and update the actual funding amounts between their various line items to reflect the correct amounts. So here you can see the various line items and how the funding amounts are being adjusted. The total budget remains the same. It's just the funding between the various line items that are being adjusted. So additionally, they also incorporate any new funding that they might have received for projects. When they have made these proposed changes, they take it to their DART commission. Their commission approves those changes, and once they are approved, they essentially come to the MPOs so that we can update the TIP to reflect the changes that they are making to their formula project. So that is essentially what we are doing right now. You can, as I mentioned, you can see the amounts as they are being adjusted between the various line items. The adjustments have been approved by their commission at their April meeting. And so they have requested the MPO now to incorporate those changes into our 2021 through 2024 TIP. So with that, we support the amendment request, and we are asking for your approval to go ahead and make those changes. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them at this time.
Thank you. Any questions?
What's the CRRSAA? That's the last bullet point on our agenda. On the fair transit, it talks about funding, supplemental funding from CRRSAA.
Shiroshi, do you have that answer?
Yes, I did not hear the question quite in entirety, but I think you're asking about the CARES Act funding that provided the very last one in the list of funding. It's the funding through the CARES Act that was provided to DART for I believe bus shelters and the new project of $57,000.
It always seems strange to me that we're acting on funding on DART stuff, but Todd, how much information, I'm fine with it, but I guess I'm curious as to how much time or information they share with you guys before it comes to us.
They share the basics, Steve. I mean, it's basically their funding because we're considered from FTA standpoint, the pass-through agency on some of this. It has to be in our tip, even though we don't really deal with it, and it passes directly to DART. It's just a pass-through process, and we have to include it in our tip and amend it when they make changes, similar to the work program changes that we did earlier for the MPO. This is essentially what they're doing.
Okay, and does Elizabeth give you an overview of the discussion of the DART board? If there was some dissension or no votes or anything, does she share any of that information with you?
If there's a big issue, yes, she would share that, but there wasn't on this particular go around.
Okay. I'll move it.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 8, report and vote on the FYI 2021-2024 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment. Mr. Rosie?
Yes, this is also a TIP amendment request, and this amendment request is coming from the Iowa DOT to add a project that received federal funding. The project is a paving project for the eastbound exit ramp on the US 65 West interchange. The federal funding amount that they have received is $697,500 through the NHPP funding. There are no TIP modifications. We are essentially adding the project to the TIP since it has received federal funding as requested by Iowa DOT. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Otherwise, we are seeking your approval to add this project to the TIP. Thank you.
Where's the exit ramp now?
This is the I-80 eastbound to US 65. So,
Okay, so north.
so we're extending the turning lane about 1,500 feet.
Okay.
Because right now, the issue is that it bottlenecks pretty good at peak hour.
Yeah.
Because I think truckers don't know they can get over.
Right.
And they kind of hold it up to 2 middle lanes. So if you give them more, they should know then they in future they'll be able to get over and get out of the way. Okay. So then hopefully it does better. This was kind of before the ICM, but it also was identified in that project as well. So we just decided to move forward, adding some pavement out there to that.
Any other questions?
I couldn't hear that exactly. Is this on I-80 or is it on the South Bypass?
No, it's the exit ramp for I-80. It's adding an additional turning lane.
Eastbound to southbound.
Okay.
So Andy, when it says total cost
To get on 65.
775, does that mean the project's been bid or is that the engineer estimate?
That's the estimate.
Does that take into account the craziness on the cost we're all seeing right now?
Hopefully.
I mean, it's
We were
nuts.
pretty conservative with our estimates.
I mean, we're seeing 35% increases and stuff. If you can even get it.
Right.
That's nuts.
That's the big question.
Steel went up January, February, March, April, 4 to 10% a month. They said Amazon pre-purchased half of all the steel that's going to be made in the United States for all their facilities. I mean, it's just absolutely nuts.
Helping my son with his house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's golden plywood.
280% since pre-pandemic.
When we're renovating apartments and you can't get stoves, you can't get refrigerators, you can't get windows. Right. It's nuts.
It is.
And then you get the privilege to pay 35% more
Yeah.
to actually do it. Okay. I don't know if that was the estimate or just that minute got bid. Okay.
So what happens, Andy, if it does, to follow up to his question, if it does come in over the 775?
Well, I think we have a parameter in there that if it's over a certain amount, we can refuse the bids and rebid it or rethink it or something.
Okay.
Otherwise, we bid.
All right.
We'll bid.
Any other questions? All right, all those, do we have a motion?
Not yet. I'll move it.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 9 is report and vote 2019-2023 passenger transportation plan amendment. Allison?
Thank you. Like Trioshi's amendment before, we're adjusting some of DART's passenger transportation plan funding, which comes through the 5310 program, which is the special needs program, which aims to increase the mobility for persons over 65 and or with disabilities. And so this is a specific program for these things. Unlike the TIP amendment, this specifically looks at that microtransit program that they're looking at in Ankeny, as well as shelters and then bus replacements as well. Like the TIP amendment, these adjustments were approved at the DART Commission in April 2021. MPO staff recommends their approval, and happy to take any questions at this time.
Joe, question. I mean, I think this is awesome. It says in here, if the project is successful, microtransit will then be extended to other communities in DART service area. Does that mean that we haven't had this program yet in any city?
Correct.
Mhm.
It's a sad commentary. Okay, I'll move it.
Second. All right, any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 10 is report and vote on the salary and compensation review matrix. Todd, you're going to give us an update on that?
Yeah, just we shared some of this with you last month during my review. The committee asked us to develop a salary review matrix. We accomplished that and shared with the committee in April kind of the comparisons, the review matrix, and a draft salary schedule. Those final drafts were included in your agenda packet. Assuming it's approved, these would go into effect for the reviews that will start next month. I don't know, is there another slide, Zach, or whoever's running oh. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
So no changes from what we saw last month, Todd?
Correct.
Okay.
This is Sarah. The only question I have is for the chair as it relates to this. Maybe more of a friendly reminder that now you need to activate the review committee to do kind of the 6-month touch base to get Todd's review schedule back on the fiscal year calendar.
Right, and I was going to,
I volunteered to be on that.
I was going to have Matt and I'm hoping Ted would do it. He kind of came up with the matrix. And I haven't talked to Mary Underwood, but I'm hoping that he would participate in that also. So that would be the 3-person. I think it's just a 3-person committee, Todd, is that correct?
Typically, yeah, that's what it's been, yeah.
I second the committee.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No, didn't mean to put you on the spot. So, yeah, so he's done it before. So we do have that committee in place and that'll be part of it. We'll move forward on that soon, very soon. Do we have a motion then?
I'll move it.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Thanks, Ted, by the way. I know you're online, but I know we haven't had a discussion, but I figured you would participate in it.
We'll buy you lunch next time, Ted.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we'll buy you lunch.
Come on down. Let's see, item number 11 is report vote on the Purple Heart Highway update. Todd, you're gonna give us an update on that.
Yeah, thank you. Since the last time we spoke, I mentioned that there were some additional studies that the DOT had asked us to, and Federal Highway, to satisfy their requirements. We met with both agencies and went through the things that needed to be looked at and reviewed, and then worked with the consultant to develop a draft scope of services to satisfy their needs. Both agencies have signed off on that scope. So there's an interim year traffic operations report looking at the traffic at different intervals out to the future. Predictive 2050 safety analysis looking at using those traffic operations, predicting the accidents, crashes that will happen over that time frame, and where there might be hotspots. What do we do to help alleviate that? And then evaluation of controlling design criteria, looking at the plans and seeing if there's anything in the plans that need to be modified based on interstate design criteria. So we've put that scope together. The rough cost estimate to do those studies is about $225,000. There's a couple ways we can go about funding that. We do have, as the committee's aware, reserve funds that go beyond our reserve policy that we want to set aside for the rainy day. So there's been discussion about using some of that to bring that level down. This certainly could be used for that. This is an optional vote item if you want us to pursue that, and we can bring back more detail at the policy meeting as well. But just wanted to give you where we're at with this process right now.
Todd,
Mm-hmm.
the background information says you're continuing to work with the Greater Des Moines Partnership and other stakeholders. I assume that's the airport as well. Are they involved in funding the 267?
Not to this point, no. We haven't had that discussion with the airport, but I can reach out to Kevin.
What about the partnership, or do they have money in it?
Not currently, no.
Todd, how long do you estimate it's going to take to do the study if it's approved?
I've got a timeline of 4 to 6 months.
This is, oh,
Go ahead.
Go-
Go ahead, Mary.
this is Sarah, and Andy, you can take this message straight back to your boss, but I was very unhappy with the last meeting and what occurred. And personally, I think we're lighting money on fire if we pay for any of these reports. I would rather spend money on a lot of BS than find a path to get the votes we need to go about this legislatively, because the DOT is not going to be a partner with us on the project. It is very clear about that from the last meeting. I don't know if anybody else interpreted this differently, but it is very disheartening to see what could be one of our strongest partners not hearing our requests and how important this is to not only the region, but the state that we get this done.
Mayor, thank you. My comment would be somewhat similar. You know, the first 2 minutes of that meeting were fantastic. I've had this discussion with Todd. And the last 45 minutes was how we're not going to be able to do this, and all the reasons laid out that it's not going to happen. That we need an alternative route for less than 1% of the vehicles that are going to use this road, and you know that's going to be what $10–15 million to build a bridge that we would need. You know, I had an opportunity to sit down with Representative Losey and the DOT lobbyists and had discussions with her. I think before we spend dollars on this study, that we probably need to go up and have a conversation with the director again and let him know that this is a priority, that it's going to happen through the legislation. Obviously not this session, but I believe next session there will be enough cheerleaders to get this done. And I know his biggest fear is that it's going to happen all over the state. And I don't believe, I think this is a very different situation that you have anywhere else in the entire state. And I know that he's shared that with both of us last year when we went up and had a personal meeting with him, that he's reluctant to get behind it because he doesn't want everyone in the state asking for the same thing. I mean, we're asking for an 11-mile exemption for the 40-mile-an-hour, and then we're also need the co-op to be able to travel on the road. I do not want to take on Farm Bureau. I know that we'll lose with that. We need them as a partner. We're not trying to wreck their business. We're not trying to change them. But I think the director and I think we need to go up and just have a brief conversation with him, and I will reach out to him
and set up a meeting where I'll go up there personally and speak to him. But I think he just needs to realize that we've got to come to terms and figure out how we can make this happen together. Or we're just gonna butt heads and it's just gonna get ran through. And I don't think that either one of us want to do that.
No, I think the meeting, the first part, we're along for, we want this
I
to
understand.
happen. But all of the hurdles that are in the way to make it happen. And just going about the speed reduction or the reduced speed by legislative action doesn't negate any of these studies that we're talking about here. These all have to take place.
No, and I understand.
On federal highway. And I understand that, maybe some of the burn is that, we're asking you guys to pay for this. And, and I understand that. I came from working in the local government, so I understand that. And so moving forward, this has to be done, and then, we're gonna have to work on figuring out the design of the signs and any of those other features. So that's another time frame. Then you have to let that project and get it done. So next session isn't too far away.
No, it's not.
And I agree with that. It's just, very, very reluctant to have those, have it signed as an interstate and not having folks, realize it's not acting like an interstate, because it's not going to act like a regular interstate with farm machinery on it. So that's what we're kind of worried about. And I understand it's a very small portion, which is in a way kind of even worse, so then it doesn't happen very frequently. So, those are just things. And we're going to discuss the timeline and things like that next week at the next meeting. But, and the items that we need to get done, kind of our to-do list, and then, kind of assign time frames for all those, kind of like Stephanie Reba had asked.
Yeah.
So, those will be there. And then just trying to talk a little more about, refining any of those potential solutions. And, obviously one of them is the legislation. And, you guys can, I like to give you an opportunity to talk about that. And, I feel that last meeting seemed a little one-sided, talking a lot, but I think I talked to you guys that, we kind of need to set the stage.
I understand.
And I did see the note in there that, I wasn't saying anything positive, but, I think that, we talked, Joe, that, it's a challenge, but not everything we were saying was negative. I think it's just something that, you guys have to, like hauling rubbish on the interstate. And that's something that, I didn't even really think about until I started to dive into it, and you think that, the landfill is out there, and, so then all those trucks are going to be on the local system or something. So, I just wanted to set the stage of all the things that need to be done. Just because our traffic safety folks aren't, 100% with that doesn't mean that as an organization we can't respond to every needs and stuff. So I think being with the director and telling him, expressing your feelings and going from there, I think it's a good,
It's a good starting
It's
point.
been a year or so since we talked with them, or you guys have, and,
Yeah.
and I think it'd be good.
And has this been discussed by the DOT commission at a meeting?
Briefly, I think. I don't know. I mean, Catherine is, I think, brought it up.
We had several of the commissioners at the last meeting.
Right, when we went there in June. There was several of them, and, this is in her district, I believe, in Commissioner Berman's district.
Yeah, so so we're talking about state law and things, and, the
Right.
weight restriction is federal. And that's something that's going to have to be done at the federal level, because the feds are the ones that require the weight restrictions in the interstate system. And did we include this as a top priority for the DC partnership trip? And hopefully we did.
I don't know if it's Todd or Dylan.
It's in their policy book.
Yeah. in there.
Well, yeah, well, I guess what I've always advocated, it just seemed to me like the DOT's acknowledged we can't fix the mixed masters. One way to help with that is to get traffic off of it. One way to do that is to redesignate this so people know that they can use it to get to 80 or whatever the direction is. So I've always been kind of perplexed on why the DOT hasn't been more strongly advocating for this. Because we all acknowledge there's not enough money in the room to fix the mix masters. We have to get people off of them. This is the best way to get people off the mix masters.
In a loop around the city, I mean, eventually that's going to happen. It might not be in our lifetime, but we need to prepare for our kids and our grandkids. That is going to happen. I'm not.
No, I'm thinking about coming up 30, coming up north 35 and West Des Moines.
Yeah.
Get on to go over to 80. I mean, that is just a boatload of traffic. If they can understand that, we use it.
Absolutely.
And first of all, they don't know it's designation. It's like all it says northbound. Why the hell would I get on Highway 5 to go north when I'm already on 35 going north? I never understood why it doesn't say 5 east or something.
And we're not changing the speed limit. What it is now, right?
I think so.
We're not asking to change being 70 miles an hour on this. It's 65.
I don't think I mean, I guess there's a potential we could.
No, I would never do that.
That would make that speed differential.
Yeah. So should we continue this for a month, subject to further discussions with the director? And also, I think it'd be nice, Todd, for you guys to explore other funding sources. It just doesn't seem like we should bear 100% of this.
Yeah, I can reach out.
I agree 100%. I mean, the partnership obviously should participate in some of these studies also.
Well, yeah, it just seems, Andy, it just seems like the DOT should have some money in this.
Yes.
I mean, we could carve this up a number of ways, and it doesn't really burden anybody in particular.
No. Right.
There just seems like there's a handful of interested parties that could all throw in 50 grand.
Exactly.
And manage this a little bit better.
Well, we do have the design coming up for the signage and for those other things.
So are you saying that the DOT would take on all of that cost then if you're not?
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, we have been involved with designing of things, but I think from my understanding, it's been the locals are requesting this, and that they would be, at least my leadership, direct leadership, is that you guys would be trying to front this cost.
And that's why,
because we build it and we're maintaining those things. And I'm not trying to say that that's, I'm just saying that, the roadway for us is working real great out there.
But it could work much better. Let's agree that it could work. And it could take heat off of exactly what Mayor Gear said. It could take heat off of the rest of the system.
And we've heard that the airport, they have a hard time getting people there from the bypass because it's 5 on one side, 5 on the other. So I agree with that.
we just need help from you guys saying this is going to help the mix masters. It's got to. It has to.
I mean, it would alleviate a lot of action on the systems that you're have to maintain and everywhere else. I mean, he said it very clearly. I mean, it would take a lot of heat off of it.
And somebody coming from the east that wants to get on the 35 south,
Yeah.
they would take that around instead of going all the way through Urbandale.
Yeah. Or down through 235, or
If you're going 35 north and you want to go 80 west, you're not going to go through Mixmaster. You're just going to, you're not part of the problem.
you're going to go through 235.
The loop ramps are. Well, you're going to go 3580 and go stay on 3580 until it turns 80. Maybe 235.
I wouldn't do that. And I mean, I live here, and I don't think Google Maps would tell you to do it that way. I think the quickest way is to get on 235 and go and then end up 35.
So shorter. So Todd, going forward, maybe what we should do is, because I would like to see us move forward on studies that we know are going to be required to accomplish our ultimate goal. But like Mayor Gear, I feel like there's a lot of parties that have an interest in seeing this happen, that should put some skin in the game, and we should just identify how we want to pay for this, and then go to those parties and ask them to contribute. But I think to delay on doing these studies will set us back even further, because I don't, I was on the call and I wanted to open a vein about halfway we're gonna have to do the things that they're gonna require. And these are things that we would have to do no matter what. So it's probably time to get the parties together and figure out how we're gonna pay for this.
Sure. Yeah, I can certainly do that.
So you'll come back with a recommendation or something like that, Todd, that
Yep.
how it can be split up through communities and different other organizations.
Sure. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, let's find 5, they
Yeah.
usually throw in 50.
Yep.
So is it right, my motion to continue it for a month? We want to do this, but continue for a month, so we can explore funding, and then you can have a follow-up with the director.
Yeah.
All right, I love that.
Yep. Any other discussion, questions? I second that motion.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 12 is our quarterly budget report from Dylan.
Thank you. On the in the agenda and on the slide, if you go to the next slides, well, I guess we don't have a slide. Oh, sorry. Okay, we have our quarterly budget report. This is the report as of the 9 months through the year, so only 3 months left to go. The actual insert is in the agenda packet. If there's any questions about this, I'm happy to take them. Everything seems to be running on track. No issues or anything like that. So unless there's a question, we just wanted to keep you apprised of how we're faring so far through the year.
Did you see this yesterday, Bob?
Yes, we did cover this yesterday.
Any questions?
I'll move it.
It's just a report. Item number 13 is a report on the EJ update, environmental justice report update that we had ordered to the subcommittee. Allison?
Yes, thank you. As you all know, this group asked us to put together a subcommittee to review the environmental justice report methodology. We met twice over the last couple months to discuss the report itself, funding, and then state and federal requirements. And so the next couple slides will go through the amended recommended methodology and how we'll be setting funding targets. Thank you. So historically, the MPOs used the regional average, which you can see there on the middle 2 columns there. The subcommittee recommended that we use the top 30th percentile, top 30% of each of the degrees of disadvantage. So we, as MPO staff, translated that to the 70th percentile threshold. A reminder, there are 113 census tracts in the MPO planning area. So using that 30th or that 70th percentile would cap the number of census tracts in any degree of disadvantage at 34. And so this table on the right here, you can see the difference in the percentages between that regional average and the 70th percentile. None too drastic, but just wanted to make you aware. Next slide, please. So when we map this out, these are the changes that happen here. It constricts it back to the urban core, leaving a handful of census tracts in some of the suburban areas, but brings it back really to that urban core, downtown, east side, and things like that. We can go on to the next slide. So some of the next steps, one, obviously we're reporting out to this committee. We'll also be updating the online mapping so that member communities and partner organizations can access this information for their own projects and planning purposes. And then we'll also be integrated into the MPO processes. MPO staff will be reviewing this funding mechanism with the STBG funding subcommittee going forward. So this month it's up for your review, and then in June we'll bring this back for an approval. I'd be happy to take any questions. It was quite the process, and many of you in the room were there. If you have any comments to add, I'd be more than welcome to have them at this time.
Allison, thank you.
So is this going to go through STP, the committee, before it comes back here in June?
Steve, no, probably not. It will. That is that we're going to kind of take a look at the overall scoring system for our STPG projects, and as part of that, we're going to incorporate environmental justice stuff into that updated scoring system, which we'll be probably working on over the whole summer, and then we're bringing it back to committees probably early fall in advance of the next round of funding.
So in June, of when we're asked to approve this, are we approving funding changes because of this?
No, just the methodology for how we do EJ.
So do you have any ideas, we sit here today, how it's going to impact the scoring system for funding?
So I can add there that the subcommittee recommended, similar to how we have targets within our SDBG funding categories, such as roads and bridges and system optimization, that we include EJ as a target to include in that methodology as well. So,
I don't know if that's 3 points or 30 points, or and how's it going to impact?
We
I
don't
have a
know that
problem
yet.
with it, but if you look at the thing now, 90% of the eligibility in the city of Des Moines. And maybe that's where it needs to be, but I still don't have an idea of how big of an impact on the scoring this is going to have.
Well, I mean, a couple of the impacts is carless and low income. We don't have any transit in part of that area. DART doesn't even go down Southeast 14, as we talked about. Part of that, we talked about DART funding, we talked about doing some of the things for that. Maybe this should be part of that.
I get it. I agree with the whole concept.
I mean, it's
I just don't know the magnitude of the impact.
We wanted to get to what would be the criteria that would be really capturing the most economically disadvantaged individuals. Beyond that, we didn't recommend a scoring system or how this would be weighted in the overall project assessments. And I think the reason we wanted to just first of all reach agreement on what is economically disadvantaged first. I think that is a bigger discussion for the full committee to discuss how you want to weight this. I think we got to a good place with identifying what we believe is the most economically disadvantaged areas. Beyond that, we need to do some work, and I think we're totally open to.
I'm fine with all this, but it sounds like it's going to the scoring impact of this is going to work its way through the funding committee first.
Correct.
Okay, I'm fine.
Yep.
Any other comments, questions?
I just want to commend Allison for her hard work on this. She did a great job. Brought a lot of people with divergent views together and came up with, I think, a pretty workable solution. However this gets implemented or however this gets used, just getting all of the parties on board was, I think, really yeoman's work. And I appreciate your work, Allison.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds like we ought to give you the rest of the afternoon off.
Yeah. Just shut the camera off. You're good.
if you say
Anybody else?
I think this is really good work, and I think it's the best report we've had in my time on the MPO. I was particularly impressed with the leadership on this whole issue of justice from the members of the subcommittee from the suburbs, and I think there's growing recognition that you have to have benchmarks out there to measure yourself against for any accountability. And one of our responsibilities with federal money is to have this report and to ensure that we're not putting funding or other roadblocks in front of the projects that need to be done in areas where there's vulnerable citizens. And so I think this is really good, and I think Supervisor McCoy nailed it, that the staff looked at this really hard and came back with some great recommendations. So great job, Allison, Dylan, Todd, and all.
All right, let's move on to item number 14, report on the Economic Development District update from Gunner.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be with you again. Have just a real brief overview for you on where we've been. Just a quick reminder that we are out of phase one. We have waived support for it, and we have it unanimously from all 7 counties in the eligible district. We are firmly into phase 2. We have formed a steering committee to oversee the development of the comprehensive economic development strategy, and we are working on that now. As a reminder, once we have everything put together, we will submit for designation. We hope to have that submitted in the fall, and then we're also hopeful that if we keep up the current pace, we should be fully operational by mid-2022. Next slide, please. So as referenced, we did form a steering committee, and then in earlier this week, we held a SWOT analysis with stakeholders from throughout the region. We had 50 people in the room for that discussion. It was a good discussion. We are moving toward project selection next month to be included in the SEDS document, and we remain on track to put the document together in July and review and submit it by end of August. Next slide. So as mentioned, we had that SWOT analysis and goal setting session earlier this week. 46 attendees plus some MPO staff. We're in the process of analyzing that feedback and putting together some draft recommendation language for the steering committee. That's it for me, unless I can answer any questions.
Gunnar, do I read this right, that the steering committee is 35 people?
Correct.
So I was on the SWOT analysis yesterday, or earlier this week, and you know, it was really well done. Gunnar, I think, took chat and people spoke freely. I think it worked really well. You know, I think the challenge is when you're working with 7 counties and everybody's putting money into the process, they all want to be represented, and of course they have professional staffs that want to be there as well. So you have electeds and professional staff. So, but I think this could work, but I think at some point you're gonna have to whittle this down to a core group of people, a dozen or so, that are really the decision makers at some point. And I don't know when that happens, but I you know, hats off to you for keeping 46 people engaged in the SWOT analysis and taking us through that virtually, because that's not easy to do, and it worked well.
Yeah, 5 people per county seems like a lot.
Yeah. So in many cases, you had a council member, mayor, and city manager, you know, a planning person. So you have a lot of, or an economic development person. You had people from, you know, the partnership that were engaged. So I mean, I think ultimately you'll come up with some kind of articles to go forward to say, okay, these are how many seats you get per, you know, your contribution, and you decide who you want to send, and we don't care who it is as long as it's not, you know, the whole council and the mayor and manager. So, but at some point it'll have to come down to that, I think.
Point well taken. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Quick question, was the Zoom meeting recorded? Could we get a link if it was, just to kind of get a flavor for how the discussion went?
It was recorded. It's not published anywhere as yet, and I don't know if there was the intent to publish it, but we certainly could.
We can certainly share it with the exec committee.
I don't really even know how that works, but I just thought it might be interesting. Matt's comments get me real interested in how it went. That sounds great.
Chris, I'll make sure to get that to you.
All right. Any other discussion, questions for Gunnar? Gunnar, thank you. Good work. Item number 15 is a report on FY 2022-2025 Transportation Capital Improvement Program. Allison, you don't get the day off. You get to talk about this.
Just a couple more items and then I'll get out of here. Just so you know that the MPO staff will be starting to do a data request. We do this annually for the TCIP, which is usually reported out in August. So we collect roads, bridges, pedestrian and bicycle projects, things like that. Over the years, we have added a couple more layers to it. One includes water trails improvements to keep a tab on what's going on there. Through our hazard mitigation contract with Polk County a few years ago, we were asked to start tracking how many hazard mitigation projects are going on the metro. This seems like a good place to fit that in while we're asking for all this data. And then also we're doing some green infrastructure mapping and work with the WMAs. And so we'll be including a request for any green infrastructure projects as well. So your city staff, mostly the technical committee, will be getting requests from us. We just want to make you aware that this is going on. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Any questions for Allison? All right, item 16 is report FY 2022-2025 Transportation Improvement Program Development. Shiroshi.
Yes, thank you. This is an update on the fiscal year 2022 through 2025 TIP development. We began the process of developing the TIP earlier this year, reached out to the member communities to fill out their TIP report, which essentially includes information about programming of their federal transportation projects. So we have received input from our member communities, and we are in the process of programming the projects. We are also developing the draft TIP document. So we hope to have a draft TIP document along with the project list by the end of May, during at which time we will be entering a public comment period. We are expected to submit the draft TIP document to the Iowa DOT on June 15th for their review. The final TIP will be due to the DOT on July 15th. During that period, we will be, of course, going through our public comment period, and we'll be taking any input from the public as well as from our member communities in terms of any changes or corrections or other changes we might need to incorporate in the final document. We will also hold an online public meeting on June 23rd, 5 p.m. The information will go out to all our member communities to share with their contacts if anybody wants to provide us direct public input with the TIP with regards to the TIP document. So this is just an update on the schedule and the process. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them at this time. Otherwise, this is just an update on the TIP development process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? We've got item 17 is report on EV charging infrastructure and alternative fuel corridor designations. Allison.
Yes. We just wanted to make you aware that there's a couple white papers that just came out. One from Federal Highway that put together a really great and easy to read funding matrix report for EV charging infrastructure investments. They outline a number of the different funding programs that we regularly use at the MPO, STBG, RAISE, which was formerly BUILD, Infra, and things like that. And so it can show you how any of these fundings can be used for actual planning processes, implementation, things like that. And so we want to make you aware there is a link in your packet to that, and the technical committee was informed of this as well. Also, the Federal Highway put out their newest designations for alternative fuel corridors. Iowa has a number of these already on the ready and pending list. I-35 and I-80 are on the alternative fuel corridor ready list. I-235 is not, so it's something the region could look into if it wants. Also, state routes are eligible. It's not just federal routes. And this is not just electric vehicles. It also includes light natural gas, hydrogen, and other alternative fuels. So we just want to make you aware, and we're putting it out to your city staff as well. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Did they consider Highway 5 on the alternative fuel corridor?
I did not see Highway 5 on there. The state routes were, I want to say 33 and 81, but I'd have to look back at the website, honestly.
Thank you, Allison. Any other questions? Item 18 is a report on the transload facility from Zach.
Yes, just want to give you a quick update on where we're at with the transload facility. In April and May, they've been working a lot of grading on site, working with the site utilities, moving those around, and then basically prepping for the warehouse pad. We're still expecting our first reimbursement from them to come through probably any time now. They're just working that out with the mining companies and getting that finalized. So we're expecting to have that soon and work through our first reimbursement request for build grading funds. We did prepare and submit our quarterly report, which was due on April 30th. That was submitted to FRA and they approved that report. I do have a few photos I want to share with the group. This is the site looking to the east. Probably, I want to say this was taken probably in early April, mid-April. This photo here is looking basically the same direction, and it was taken just about a week ago. So you can see all the groundwork they've done on the site. You can see there in the middle of the screen the location of the warehouse pad that they're lining out. So a lot of exciting work happening on site, really starting to transform. Here's just another image showing some of the work they're doing. Just kind of get you an idea of what the site looks like as they continue to work. We'll try to keep providing you with images so you can see how that's going. As far as schedule goes, I have kind of a rough outline of the schedule here. This was provided to us by Ryan, I think mid-April, when they gave us this updated version of the schedule. As you can see, the site work, some of the site work on 15th and 14th streets is going to be completed here probably end of June. They've got some grading work. It's also going to be completed into July. A lot of the rail work and more of the extensive site work along East 18th and East 15th is going to be completed. For the rail work, probably in late October. That work along East 18th and 15th is going to take a little bit longer. I think many of you are aware that WRA did a water line that goes through there. One of their main lines went through there, and so that's going to cause a little bit of waterworks, right? Waterworks, sorry, yeah, waterworks. Some delay there, but they will have that completed by early 2022. Again, there's some finishing work. Some of the main parts of the warehouse are going to be completed yet in 2021, but as far as being completely fitted out and finished, they're looking at early January 2022, and they're looking at a closeout date on the project of March of 2022. So that's the schedule as it stands today. And that's the update on Transload. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have about the Transload facility project.
Do we know when they're getting inquiries about people that want to use it in the future? I mean, business opportunities?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I talked to Paul about a month ago, they wanted that warehouse twice as big than how they're building.
We figured they would, but I hadn't heard anything.
Yeah,
So that's
no,
good
it's
to know. Yeah, it's good.
No, I think they will eventually, but I think they're gonna roll with that as it is.
I think they've got some future phases in mind.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's
Well, hopefully that will spill out to the warehouses that are getting constructed too.
Right.
Dreams get built a ton of them.
Yeah.
Through the whole metro.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you see what the assessments did on warehouse? Shocked me, 35%.
Yeah, but there's so many sales. I mean,
Yeah.
there's Randy, he had so many sales, you couldn't argue with him.
Yes.
It was an enormous increase.
Yeah.
From a property tax
Yep.
standpoint. Not offset the loss to the hotels and restaurants.
Yeah. Right.
They went down 30.
Yeah.
They didn't understate that. I mean, that's great news. We all thought that was what was going to happen. It's nice.
Any other questions, concerns? All right, Zach, thank you.
Thank you.
Did that lawsuit ultimately go away from the people in Omaha, Joe?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about it. So I
never
don't
saw the final thing. I know
I
there's
haven't
motions to dismiss and stuff.
Yeah, Zach, I don't know if you've heard, I have heard absolutely nothing from our legal department, nothing. from
I
any-
believe that one went away with the city. The federal one, I'm not sure where that one was at with him in Omaha, but I'll out of curiosity take a look.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
All right, item 19 is a water trails update from Todd.
Yeah, we continue to work on the sub-agreements with our partners, DOT, Federal Highway, Central Iowa Water Trails, the city of Polk County. almost all of them are drafted and being reviewed by the various parties. We have scheduled a meeting on the 27th with Federal Highway DOT and again, all the interested parties to go through all the agreements at the end of this month. Here's a list of the various agreements that we're putting together. They're all in like I say, various stages of drafting and review. And we're working through those. The ones furthest along are the MPO FHWA DOT one, and then the MPO Central Iowa Water Trail and Polk County one are pretty well there. The other and the MPO Central Iowa Water Trails one. The other two are being more drafted in various stages. So we're getting close to having everything in place. We do have most of our permitting in place from DNR and the Corps. There's a couple pieces that need to be finished out, but we have made good progress on those pieces. The design is pretty well completed. There's a couple things that we had to adjust with the city on Birdland, and got that figured out, and worked through a construction meeting held last week with contractors to look at the plans that were put on the DOT's bid website, and went through questions with the folks on how they would go about actually constructing the facilities on Scott and at the various marinas or various parks. So that went very well. And we're going to have kind of a recap meeting about that later this week as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Todd? Thank you, Todd. Item 20 is a legislative update from Dylan.
Thank you. Last time we spoke, it was a couple days before projects were due for transportation reauthorization to Representative Axne's office. There was a release the other day that said that there were 2,000 submissions for projects across the country. Went through and totaled up. There were 23 from Axne's district, totaling about $86 million in projects. And if you recall, they had mentioned that they're going to try to get between 15 to 20 million for each congressional district. So just to give you a sense of scale of what was received and how much paring down there will have to be if they want to hit that number. The House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee chairs have said they want to move the 5-year bill forward in the coming weeks. So we should be seeing some activity on this over the summer. Other somewhat related thing in the federal side is COVID funding. A couple days ago, the Treasury released additional guidance for the American Rescue Plan, and a lot of this money goes to state, local governments. Transportation isn't directly mentioned. They have infrastructure funding that is for water, sewer, and broadband. Transportation isn't specifically listed. However, there are some other sections where it looks like transportation dollars could be used. The Iowa League of Cities and the National League of Cities are going to be hosting a webinar about this specific to Iowa on Monday at 2 o'clock. Additional information should be coming out later today from the league, and we'll forward that on if we receive that. If you go to the next slide is a state update, just two things as the legislature is starting to wind down. 2 bills that we were tracking have both passed and are awaiting signature by the governor. One was for the personal delivery devices. These are the small little robotic things that can go on sidewalks and make deliveries for Amazon or other companies like that. The other bill that we were watching that passed has to do with e-bikes and the definition of what a bicycle is. So that did pass. There's 3 tiers of what an e-bike is. The third tier, or class 3, has a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, and it says that they can go on trails. Again, this is awaiting signature by the governor. So if there are any questions about either of these, state or federal side, I'm happy to take them, but otherwise that's what we have for you as far as a legislative update.
Hey, Dylan, on that last one, 493, does that prohibit local governments from being able to regulate that?
I don't believe so. There was a provision in there that says local governments can do something, I believe. I'll check on that though and let you know for sure.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Wow.
This way.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'll double check on that.
That'll be for one session.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, item 21 is a report and upcoming events from Gunner.
And I don't believe if we have any to highlight today.
Okay. Item 22 is a vote on the approval of the policy agenda.
Do we need, Todd, since we continued the
Yeah.
study thing, don't we need to change that?
Yeah, I was just going to say we need to pull off the vote on the Purple Heart Highway item. We'll just do an informational update on that.
Move that agenda as amended.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item 23 is other non-action items of interest in the committee.
I have a real quick one. The Federal Highway FTA did their certification review at the end of April. That went very well. We should get their report, probably at least a draft version of it next month. They'll come and present their findings to this committee and policy committee. But like I said, it went over well overall. I think we'll end up getting several commendations. One related to the EJ work that Allison and the committee undertook. They really appreciate that process. So just wanted to let you know that that's forthcoming.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything?
I just have one quick one. The UPWP Commission approved the draft 22-26 Commission program yesterday. So I haven't delved into it all the way, but nothing. I didn't see that we lost any projects in this area, and I didn't get a chance to really see what we had. So in 2026, so sometime we can bring that and pull back again.
Absolutely. All right, our next meeting date for the exec is June 9th at 11:30. Anybody else have anything else? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, Joe. Good job, staff. Thanks all.
Yeah. That would be sitting in front of the screen. Yeah. I thought my whole tenure as chair was going to be